I'm really excited to have a conversation with you both this morning and everyone in the chat. For those that maybe don't know who we all are, we maybe should introduce ourselves. So I'm Michael. I'm one of the pastors at Cornerstone, and I kind of often get to be on this stream. So you probably, if you join us, have seen me on here before. So I will pass it off to Austin and Mary to introduce themselves.
Yeah, so I am Austin. I'm also a pastor here at Cornerstone. Like Michael, I've been on here a couple times, so I hope that you guys have been able to watch and know that. And today we're talking about the breaking of bread, so we brought in an expert.
There you go.
Introduce yourself there, Mary.
I don't know why I'm the expert. Anyway, I'm Barry. I am not a pastor at Cornerstone. I just happen to go there. So, yeah.
You are also on our board.
Yeah, Mary's one of our board members as well.
Yes. I'm on the board, I guess so. Yeah.
Mary used to be a pastor, though.
True, but not at Cornerstone.
No.
It's true. It's true. Mm-hmm. Hi, Marie. Hi, Caleb. Hi, Daryl. And Dawn. Wow, look, we've got people joining us already. That's so good.
Perfect. I like the waves. It's starting to catch. It's gonna be the new thing.
Yeah. People don't need to use words anymore. It's all emojis. That's all you need. So Mary, you don't have Facebook, correct?
Right. Yes.
Yes. So you won't be able to see any of the comments that are happening. So we will try and keep you informed of what people are saying.
Okay.
I can see them, and I think Austin can see them as well. So
yeah, we can bring those up, and then we can just that's our job today, is to just say the comments, and then Mary has to reply to them.
Oh, I don't have to. Wow, this is a good deal. Right. I don't know if she signed up for this, but
no,
I didn't know what I was signing up for. So here we go.
Joanne says it's nice to have you on here, though, Mary.
Okay, so I can see these comments on the side.
Oh, you can.
Oh, they are showing up for you. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So.
Okay. All right. Do we want to start just with question one? Just jump right in there.
We can jump right in. I got it ready. Here we go. Here's question one. When you think about eating together, what memorable meals come to mind and what made them special? I feel like Rick gave us an easy starting question this week, which is nice because often he starts with some difficult ones. So
just jumping head first in.
Yeah, exactly. Dawn didn't like that we were talking about only speaking in emojis, so she's now using words with an emoji. So I don't know if that fixes the problem or not. But oh man, this is honestly right now, with not being able to eat with anyone, pretty much any meal with people feels memorable. Like just the ability to gather and eat meals, I think, is such a great time of bonding and community, and I miss that so much. But if I had to pick specific memorable meals, honestly, for me, it's probably, we used to do a weekly family meal with my family. So my siblings, their kids. So every Sunday we'd gather, and it was chaotic, and the amount of cousins kept growing, and it was getting louder and more crazy. And we all met at my mom's house, and she loves cooking for people. So she would cook us all a meal with all of the allergies and everything. But it was just great to gather together as a family and see one another. So I think what made it special was the people. If I had to, pick one thing. But yeah, I think right now that's the one I'm missing the most.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I would so this is the first time I actually got to partake in communion in the church building in a while. So Rick mentioned that the things have changed. So I checked again this morning, and there's special stipulations, which was super interesting. So we had those weird little packages, where you tear the one. And so that was, I don't know if it's memorable because it just happened a couple of minutes ago, but if I had to choose a memorable meal, I've had a lot of memorable meals with Mary and Munir, actually, and their kids. I've really enjoyed those meals.
I think I know what you're going to say.
You want to share it?
Memorable.
No, there's we had Mary and Munir and the kids over one time, and it was great. We got to share food together, which is not something we can do nowadays. This was like maybe a year and a half ago. And you can tell it's pre-COVID because one of the kids like sneezed right all over the food. And then we just like, oh, and then we kept eating. It was glorious. That's when you know you're good friends, is when you can just eat sneeze food.
Sneeze. That's awesome. I was pondering this question, and when Munir and I were first married, we had this little basement apartment, and we had his small group leader over for dinner, and his wife and their 2 little kids. And so it was like a big deal. We were making food for people for the first time. And then we got everything on the table. It was amazing. And then the table just like collapsed in the middle. Thankfully, there was a leaf in the middle, so the food did not fall on the floor.
That's good.
But it was just like boom, everything went to the middle. The kids, thankfully, just started howling. They were laughing, and it was such a mortifying experience. But then we loved each other so much, and we were such good friends that we just took all the food to the living room and we sat on the floor. And this was a decade and a half ago, and it's still like a very memorable meal.
Yeah. Yeah. In the chat, we have a few people giving answers. Marie just talks about Christmas with family when they were alive and making turkey. She's embracing this speaking with emojis. So I'm impressed with the amount that she was able to add in there.
I like there.
Yeah.
The best meals aren't something specifically planned, but just spontaneous gatherings with friends where there's laughter around a table. I remember going to church and then just having people like, hey, we're making a big meal that we can't eat all of it. Do you want to come over? And it's like, that was just a part of church. You weren't sure where you were going to eat afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Missed that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I missed like church potlucks, and I remember the Sunday evening potlucks with Converge and stuff. And then there was the one meal where we came to the potluck and like every single person had brought dessert. There was like nothing but desserts. And so we just did a potluck of only dessert, and like that's pretty memorable. But then I also remember the time after that, there was like no dessert because everyone like freaked out that there was only dessert. So then the next time no one brought dessert and everyone brought the other stuff, which was also a little disappointing. So, but just the joy of like those potlucks, and like, just, it doesn't matter what food's there. It doesn't matter if there's enough food, just like the ability to gather.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Caleb's saying, right? Potlucks are nice because everyone brings a dish they made, and just the ability to just have a meal.
So our small group did a potluck once where it was a crepe themed potluck. So we made a whole bunch of crepes, and then everyone brought their own favorite topping. And that was cool. I mean, not only because I love crepes, but I tried like 3 different toppings that I've never had in crepes, right? So
What was the most unique crepe you ate?
Sylvia had like a salmon filled crepe. So it was more of a savory. No,
it was like curried salmon.
Okay. Yeah.
Really good. I'm not a huge salmon person, but I actually really enjoyed that. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Honestly, crepes are just a vessel to put whatever you want inside, right? You can have pretty much anything in there and it'll taste good. Oh, Caitlin did want to point out that the potluck of only desserts, she brought chili, and she brought a lot of chili, so there was actually chili, but nothing else. So
we ate meat.
Got like a little shot glass of chili.
Yeah. Daryl says, can't forget every potluck ever and Little Caesars. It's true, but I don't know if I've ever eaten Little Caesars at one of those potlucks. The kids ate all the Little Caesars.
Kids take it first.
Yeah, exactly.
They did love the Little Caesars.
Yeah. I like what Caitlin said about making turkey.
Yeah.
It's
hard to do that by yourself for the first time.
It was still one of the best turkeys I've ever had, and it was great, and we had lots of fun, and it was great just being able to invite all our friends over and say, we're making turkey, come join us, hang out, don't worry about anything.
So
and I think that's
was the
Go
first
ahead.
time we had our first turkey, and that was an event and a half. I like it's yeah. Long story short, it had to stay in the oven 2 extra hours than I was expecting it to. So
That's often the way it goes.
Yeah. I'm pretty spoiled. Caitlin makes a pretty darn good turkey, so I don't have to do it. But
there you go.
yeah. All right. Should we move on to question number 2?
Yeah.
Who do you wish you could take time and have a meal with? Why?
I wasn't sure if this was like anyone in history or
I
like
was
right
trying to
now.
decide which way to take that too. Yeah. I was
I
like, is
know.
this
But if I was right now, I would definitely choose my grandparents. They both turned 90 last year.
Yeah.
And I miss them a lot. And I like really just can't see them at all. I don't want to put them in any kind of risk. And they live in Calgary anyways. So if I could sit and have a meal with them and just listen to them talk, that would be amazing. Just the wisdom that they bring. Yeah, that's definitely a huge miss for me.
Yeah. What about you, Austin?
There's so many, right? Like, honestly, if I could sit down and have a meal with anybody right now, I'd be super pumped. Like, I'm just craving. I mean, right now I'm craving food, but I'm also craving fellowship with people. I would say my grandparents, because they're in the same situation where they only live like 2 hours away, but you can't really visit them right now, right? And so that, and just my family, my parents are in the States, and so it'll be a long time since I can share a meal with them, I'm sure.
Yeah.
If we're going like anyone in history though, I'm just gonna throw this out there. I would say Ruth Bader Ginsburg, just because Stephanie would talk to me for like 5 days about what I talked about with her. Like she loves her, so I would have it with her just so I could like rub it in Stephanie's face that I got to have meal.
Wow, this is
Not
just
with
like
her as well. You're not going to
No,
invite your
it's
wife.
just me and RBG.
so the anyone in history question. You didn't go with like who you want to meet. You picked somebody that Steph wants to meet to rub it in her face. That's how you picked anyone in history.
Yeah. Did you like her comment here? I'm a people, Austin. Apparently.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think everyone's kind of like in the same boat, right? Caleb's like friends, family, anybody. I just miss people. And then Dawn, the introvert, says alphabetically or chronologically, it's a large list.
Yeah.
Daryl, a restaurant full of friends. Steph wanted to remind you that she's a person, so you do see people, Austin. But I think that's right. Like as I thought about this question, pretty much anyone. I'd be happy to see anyone right now. I think I'd pick my family or Caitlin's family first. But like my other option is like if we could just have a potluck at church and have everyone come, that would make my day, my week, my month, my year. It would be great. It wouldn't matter what table I sat at, who I was talking to, just to have everyone in this, just amazing. I'm guessing you're laughing at Brian.
I am.
Yeah.
Sure.
Your love
I'm
for
here
your wife.
Brian. That's why they put me on here, is for that comic relief of loving my wife. I'm just glad that she is not being tired of me through a pandemic where we see each other all the time. So
Caleb has just invited us all to his place for lunch once the pandemic's over.
Perfect.
Caleb, I don't know if you have enough space for that, but we'll make it work. We'll just do a receiving line style. You come in, you say hello, you leave.
there you go. Just potluck, like in the front door, out the back. I was thinking like church chili cook-off once this is done.
Yeah.
That would be a sweet event.
Or to take a page out of Caleb's book, maybe a pie baking contest, because he said he always brings pie. We could just embrace that, you know?
I like that. I went to my grandparents once, and there was 4 of us, and she made 3 pies for one meal. That's what I miss, the overcooking for the amount of people you have, and then just eating everything.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think, the thing that we're seeing in the chat is just like people, we miss each other, right? Like the memories of like the people you got to spend time with. Marie talking about their beautiful wedding dinner at a Vista Lounge after their surprise wedding with 50 people. I feel like I want to hear more about this surprise wedding story. But yeah, intimate, unhurried, the ability to just sit with people would be amazing.
I think there's something special about eating with somebody, right? Like you can, when you're talking with somebody, there's always that instinct of having nothing to say, or the awkward silence. When you're eating with people, you just talk and eat, and there's no, you don't have something to say, you fill your mouth with amazing food.
That's how I feel about coffee and the importance of coffee in the lobby. Because if somebody new comes in and they can just hold a cup of coffee, it's that like safety blanket, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know what to say, so I'm going to hold the coffee. Although I don't generally have that problem. I can talk, so I still love the coffee. Yeah. Kaylin is saying that my mom also likes to make us all our own pies because we like different flavors.
Yeah.
And I try so hard. She asks, "What pie do you want?" And I'm like, "Whatever everyone else is eating." And she's like, "That's not an answer." And she'll hound me for like a week to give a pie flavor. So then I pick one I think somebody else has picked, and then no one picked it. So she'll make like 8 pies.
Are they all like full-size pies or a mini pie?
No, full-size pies.
Wow.
She loves baking food. Connor wants to know, Austin, who didn't get pie?
Well, if you ask Brian, he would imagine it was my wife who didn't get the pie. We all had like 3 pieces of pie. My grandma is famous for like, "Hey, are you full?" I'm like, "Yes, like I'm so full." And then she'll accidentally drop something onto your plate that you have to eat because she will not waste food. And so it's like her and pancakes are the worst. Yeah. Okay, Marie, I'm curious, Dr. Gabermate, I just read one of his books. So I'm curious if you've read one of his books or if you know him. You said you want to sit with him. I'm imagining that's the Anyone in History, but it'd be interesting to hear what you think of that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Like, you should just all tell us, if anyone in history, if you could pick one person who you meet with. I don't think that was the question, but I want to know now. I think that's great. Oh man, I'd love to sit down with C.S. Lewis. I think it'd be fascinating to sit down with C.S. Lewis. Mm-hmm. I'm reading through a book that's a collection of C.S. Lewis's letters throughout his life, because he had like long-time correspondence with people, and it is fascinating just seeing his train of thought and his change in theology over time, and just the relationships he built over a letter. And I'm like, I want to sit down with this guy and talk to him. It'd be great. But
yeah, it'd be interesting. N.T. Wright would be a good one too. I mean, he's still
alive. So that's still possible.
I can still do it technically. I mean, you could go ask N.T. Wright anything. Is great podcast where you pretty much just sit and listen to him talk. So
it's true. I listen to it often. It's great.
Yeah.
Don just mentioned like the special meals for me are the ones about conversation and connection more than food. It could be no-name mac and cheese. And like, that's so true. I think at this point, we're all realizing the meal is secondary. It was the people that we're missing, right?
Yeah.
Is she knocking mac and cheese? I don't get that. That's like
no-name mac and cheese. She was like just picking the cheapest, easiest meal she could think of and said it's more about people. We could do like ramen noodles, right? Although there's some students here, they might be eating ramen noodles all the time. I don't know.
Since I've been married, ramen noodles are like a delicacy because we don't get them. And then so if I go shopping, I'm like, gotta treat myself, and I'll get myself some ramen.
You miss that, hey?
I do. Yeah. That was like a staple for me, especially in high school when I was too lazy to pack a lunch. You just take like draw ramen noodles and like squish them up. And
wow.
So Daryl answered our anyone in history question with James Hoffman.
I don't even know who that is.
No, I don't know.
Coffee person.
Okay.
It's a coffee person.
I should have expected.
That theoretically he could still sit down with, I believe. So there you go. I love this, Caleb. I love this so much. He says he bought a pet fish yesterday so he could have a companion. he connects with the fish. I mean, yeah,
Why
I can really like. I have a family in my house, and I can relate to that. Yeah,
I love the smiley face just tops it off there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So much love for this fish.
How long can you hold your breath, Caleb?
I know.
He's
Okay.
relating.
With the fish. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
I was actually trying to highlight this comment, but then it moved up, so I highlighted the one underneath. But Steph has a list there. I mean, I personally think Baby Groot
That's
pretty
fantastic.
solid there. Yeah,
She has like a little baby Groot planter in her new office, and it's like, it's one of the cutest things I've seen. It's amazing.
man. Now I want a Baby Groot plant.
You should. It's a
Man, yeah. It can go beside my fake plant that makes me pretend I'm an adult in my office. Don gave me a fake plant for my 30th because now I need to be an adult. But it's sitting next to a Nerf gun, so I don't know how
just
that
evening things out.
evening
you know?
it out. Yeah,
You're 30, but just barely 30. You know,
just barely an adult now. Yeah,
Me too.
right. I'm an adult, but forever young. It's fine. It's good. Yeah.
It's fine.
Youth passion, right? It's
Yes, Rick. We can tell that you're on Sylvia's account. Yes.
as soon as that comment came up, I was like, "Yep."
Oh, it's
Yeah.
Rick. Got
Yeah.
it.
It's much more of a Rick one than All right.
Rick.
We can move to the next question. And if you want to still answer who you want to, anyone in history, do it.
Wait, Mary, did you answer that question? Anyone in history?
Like I can't even, there's so many. And honestly, this is gonna sound super Sunday school, but like Jesus.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was a cop out, so I didn't use that
You're
one.
like,
But
you make
It's like it's not a cop out and not at all because can you imagine? Like, can you just like I'm waiting for the day that marriage feast is gonna be amazing.
it's true.
And I know that makes
Speaking
it
of
sound
meals.
super churchy, but
Hey, that's okay. Yeah. Well, I was even like, I would love if it was Paul sitting down with the Apostle Paul. I think would be also so fascinating. But
I feel like
someday.
Paul would be really hard to get along with just because he was super straightforward and knew what he wanted. So that'd be difficult. Not that it wouldn't be good. He would definitely just call me out on all of my crap. But
See, but my personality is okay with that. So Paul can come call me out on all my crap. I'm okay with that. I'm good with that. Yeah.
you might do all the talking and you could just listen.
I was thinking, I don't know if it was just different this morning, but listening to Rick kind of read out the story, and I was like, Jesus is literally just sitting on the beach cooking breakfast for these guys.
Right?
Like, hey guys, like I made you breakfast. Come and join me. It's like, I don't know. It's a weird imagery. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also thinking about how Peter like jumped out of the boat and then had to go back to the boat to get the fish and drag them in and then go back to breakfast. As a classic Peter, like there's too much going on in my mind to comprehend, so I'm just gonna do something.
Well, I also love he put his clothes back on to jump out of the boat into the water.
Yeah.
Be holy, right?
Yeah, exactly. But
And then they could drag the net in, but he dragged it in by himself. So way to go, Peter.
gung ho Peter. Yeah. Dawn tells me I'm not too adult yet. That's why she gave me a fake plant. So I appreciate it, Dawn. And Daryl says that's the man-child phase. I don't know what that means. We're gonna skip past that. Marie says Jesus and Mary. Ooh. Having both of them in the same room would be fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean,
Ruth would be a really interesting one, Colleen. I'd be interesting to talk to her. Oh, there's so many good ones. Dawn's just going off on her favorite authors here.
Yeah. Well, honestly, any of the biblical characters would be such a fascinating conversation. I'm reading through Genesis and just even Jacob, Jacob did some weird things but then was favored by God and all of it. And I'm like, I want to talk to you more. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Hans J.R.R. Tolkien. Yeah. Or C.S. Lewis. Yeah.
Like-
They were friends. If you were in the right era, you could have met both
Yeah.
of them at the pub.
You
So
what was it called? Their writing club. They had a club.
I
Here,
don't remember.
Stephanie listening. She'll type it in the comments there. She'll know.
Oh, just
But
Yeah.
it would be so interesting to talk to one of those authors. Like to
Mm.
write those kinds of things, I feel like they would have to have crazy imaginations.
mhm.
So that would be a good time too. Although I
Yeah.
feel like I would just not eat and just watch the whole time and never talk.
This just makes think about talking to John after he wrote Revelation.
Just go sit on
like-
the island with him.
Yeah. His brain would be
Tell me,
fried.
what were you trying to describe here?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyways, I interrupted us going to question 3 there.
I mean, you sort of did, but the chat gave us so many good. Oh, the inkling. See, Steph was listening.
She was,
She was there.
so
She was there to answer the question. Thanks, Steph.
Steph is always listening.
All right. Question 3. The early church spent lots of time with one another, learning, eating, praying. Is that your experience of life together in the church? See, now we're getting into like the more theological questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
think
feel
at times,
what?
like I think at times, like I sit there and I think like small group and that like ability to learn together, to eat together, to pray together is definitely part of small group. And like even potlucks after services and like, but in a Sunday morning, to a degree, right? We're learning together. There's prayer, but like it's those intimate times I think of small group that we actually experience that what the church is. And I think that's why things like small groups and mentorship are so important, because you just miss out if it's only Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was going to say something similar. Like all of these things I think get taken to a different level when it's not just Sunday morning, right? Like you are learning, we are eating a very little bit when we take communion together and we're praying together, but then it's just so much more intimate when you are in a smaller group, whether that be small groups, even potlucks, we can actually have conversation and dig deep into that rather than sometimes I think we've changed communion so much to be a receiving thing rather than a partaking thing. And so potluck or small group is more of that give and take type of thing where you do that together and you can talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally. Growing up in a smaller church, like being able to eat together, like you don't take that for granted at all, like now, especially. And Dawn says it on the side there, Converge, which is like when we first started going to Cornerstone, we had Converge, and that was like a huge part of why we kept coming to Cornerstone, just being able to eat together every Sunday night and have like crazy with the children. It was always a mess, but like community where you actually allow your mess to show a little bit.
Yeah, instead of trying to hide it and like pretty yourself up for a church or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like before I came to Cornerstone, I worked at Avalon Alliance, and they do monthly like potluck meals, and just that like after church, it felt like what Converge was. Just like everyone came, there was like a gong show, kids running everywhere. There wasn't enough space for everyone. All of the things that we can't do now with COVID, right? Because we were packing in way more people than we're allowed now, but just that ability to live life together and just to experience community, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Daryl's going talking about the pub Green Dragon. Is that where the Inklings met? Is that what he's talking about?
I think so. So Daryl said something about a pub, and then Hans replied with a different pub, and then Daryl replied that one of the pubs was the one where, but I'm struggling to follow which pub is which anymore.
Too many pubs.
But, you know, basically they want to meet them where they were and share a pie. But yeah, the question we're on, Don said Converge. Caleb saying most of the time spent with the church has been learning, eating, and praying, as well as playing games, going for walks, road trips, dance parties, bonding moments. And I think that's what the church is, right? It's the ability to bond in a family. And like if you're not finding a place to belong and there isn't family, then you've probably either you've missed the point of church or the church has failed you. I remember talking to somebody that like used to be in the gangs, and when they became a Christian and came to church, they thought that like they were going to get the same level of community they found in the gang, and they realized that the gang did a better job of family, and that was really hard for them. And right. And I think that should be a wake-up call, that we need to learn to be better at that family, that community, that support system. Because I also know people that went gangs, church, back to gangs because the church didn't love them the same way their gang did, right? So, and that's hard, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. But that bonding moments thing I think is key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like hearing that is very hard, because as a church, we should be one of the, not only a safe place, right? But to have that community where we can connect with each other and be completely vulnerable. Like, and obviously that comes with being in smaller parts of the church. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be able to just go up on Sunday morning and spill out my heart or my failings of the week. But in smaller groups, once you get to know people on a more intimate level, once you get to know them and know their struggles as well. So it really, we talk about wanting Cornerstone to be a family, but then often we forget what it looks like to be a family, right? We don't show those failings or talk about those.
Yeah. Well, and I really think that's what Marie is saying, right? On the one hand, yes, and there's a rhetoric of family, but on the other hand, when crisis comes, when things fall apart, there's not often follow through on the family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. Like that's where the church I think has failed. When we say we want to be a family, but then we don't follow through when there's crisis, and that's why we'll harp on it all day long, but that need for small groups. Yeah. Because that's where people get to know you, and there is that family, and there's that ability to be like, I'm going through crisis, I need somebody, those are my people. Right? Because not everyone in a church of 350 is going to be your people. But when you find a small group of 10 that can be your people, that's where we get to see family.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'd be curious, maybe if you can write it in the comments or share it elsewhere, like what would make Cornerstone more of a family or more accepting? See, it's hard because I came to Cornerstone kind of knowing people, and then being introduced that way. But if you're just coming to Cornerstone, how do people know that you are a family and are a loving church? Because there are churches that aren't very good at that, and then there's churches that are amazing at that. So I'm curious what people think the difference is.
Yeah, and I think Dawn had a good point, just talking about, as a leadership, we've been talking about membership and how membership is supposed to be formal accountability, that once you become a member, you're committing to the family and you're committing to more than just showing up. And so, right, that is what part of membership is. We often think of church membership as, now I get to vote on a budget. But really, church membership is supposed to be about like I'm invested in these people now.
Yeah, it's like, if I can go on a little bit of a side trail there, I feel like church membership is becoming more and more like marriage, where it's, why do I need to commit? Because if I commit, then I need to stay there, right? Whereas if I don't need to commit, if I can just attend a church without becoming a member, that way if something that I don't like happens, I can just go to something else, to a different church. And it's so, I mean, where I grew up, there was like 3 or 4 churches. now there's 3 or 4 churches within a 5-minute walk of Cornerstone, right? So there's so many options that if we mess up, they can just go and be filled elsewhere, which isn't really the right attitude of that community, and that sticking as a family through the hard times, like what Marie was talking about.
Yeah. Well, Hans mentioned just like the early church, right? And the tight-knit community, the interacting with each other daily, the communities were smaller, the people were more accessible. And I think that's why we harp on this idea that you need to get into a small group that is outside of Sunday morning, because Sunday morning will never be enough. But I think the church has the ability to be like the early church. I look at your guys' small group because you're in the same small group. I know that you guys have like a WhatsApp app and you talk all the time, and there's, according to Rick, lots of jokes and fun, and I don't get to be part of it, so I don't know. But right, that I would say you guys probably are in communication a lot more than once a week.
Right. There's that, like what you're saying, those smaller communities.
Yeah.
What Hans was saying, right? That when we're in smaller communities, it's easier to actually have a relationship. I can't have a relationship with 300 people or a good one with each person, right? But I can have a deeper relationship with 12 people and be able to like share my hurts and share my messy parts, share my crisis, right? Yeah.
I'm trying to catch up on all the chat because there's a lot. There's like multiple threads of conversation happening, and so
I was reading Hans there. Time spent with the church family.
Yeah,
I agree. There's a weird balance between time spent with the church and time spent out of the church, because there was a point in my life where I realized that I was only with churched people and then not at all with people outside the church, which is also not good, because we're supposed to be being lights, right? And how am I supposed to be a light to people who are already lights? I mean, there's an element to that in the discipleship, but I would agree. I think more so we spend so much time on our own, on ourselves, like with not even activities that we want to do, but we can watch TV, we can do anything in our house, that it's harder to leave our houses now to go to church events or to non-church events to actually engage in relationship with people.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to find where the conversation between Marie and Dawn started, because I'm not sure exactly where it's went at this point.
Relational wealth is not something people acknowledge or talk about, and it needs to be on the table.
That's like the end of it, just that, right? We do have to be willing to understand like our privileges, our biases, and I think that's what the gang has over the church, is that they don't care who you are, where you've come from. Once you've committed, you're part of their family, and they will do anything for you. And we, I think, as the church, fail in that like, you're here, you're part of our family. It doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, what you look like. And I think we, as weird as it sounds, like kind of Brian saying, we can learn what it means to love people from the gangs, which is really backwards, right? And we need to be aware of that. Yeah. And I like Dawn's input into that early church thing, which we were talking about, right? Careful not to become exclusive in our inner groups. That's a massive part of our calling as Christians, is evangelism and inviting people in. And just as important as small groups are for our edification and like that joining in the body in like that deep, intimate way, that's part of what Sunday morning is here for, right? It's the wide part of it, the casting the net and inviting people in to join us, and then hopefully getting them into a smaller group where they can then have that intimate relationship. I'm going to throw your question back up here, Austin.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if what would make Cornerstone more of a family? Austin, you asked the question. Do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, I have answers. I don't know if they make sense. We harp on small groups, and small groups are so important. I think it's also important to realize that when we talk about smaller groups within the church, we also mean that those are small parts that are part of the bigger church. Like, I don't want it to seem like we're small churches on our own, because it's just a small bit of intimate knowledge with a few people, and then that gets shared with the church, and that should be strengthening Cornerstone.
Yes.
In a time of COVID, I don't know what we can do to be more of a family. So I've been talking to people about small groups this past week, just kind of interviewing them, how their small group is going, and different questions. And something that really stepped out to me was the fact that joining or leading a small group is super intimidating because it's a time commitment, right? And we don't like committing to things because we would rather be like, oh, this event is happening, I'll see if I can make it. Whereas if I say, like, Michael, we need to meet once every 2 weeks or once a week, that's much harder to see into the future to make sure I can do that.
Yeah.
And so it's hard after work to say I'm going to meet with these people no matter how I feel. But then talking to these people who are in small groups, they say they're super tired, they don't want to do it, but then they get there and it's amazing, right? It's like, and I do that with no matter where I'm going, whether it be church or not church event. I'm like sitting at home 20 minutes before it, and I'm like, oh, I really don't want to go. And then you get there and you're like, I'm so glad I went. Right?
Yeah. Caleb is encouraging us, saying that he thinks we're doing well overall. Although he reminded us we need to do more young adults, Austin. So he's there to keep us accountable. Yeah, but I think what Daryl says, right? Commitment. Being family implies being together through good and bad, and there's that, like Austin, you talked about like priorities, and Hans is talking about overcommitment and all of those things. I think a big part of the church becoming family is for individuals to prioritize the family, right? Our life, we so easy to be like, well, we need to do this, 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 and this. Oh, and if we fit church in, that's great. And I think if we want church to be a family, it has to be, okay, church commitments are my priority, small groups my priority, these, and then how do I fit those other things in? And that's not to say the other things are bad. There's, right, sports can be good, all of those things can be good, but like learning to prioritize, learning to reorient our priorities, not around like church programs, but around church family, and saying, what does it look like to commit to church more than sports, more than Netflix, more than, right? Because if we're honest, most of us spend a lot of time on things like Netflix or YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or whatever. But what would it look like if we changed our priorities and maybe gave up some of those things? And I'm speaking to myself too, so hear me, everyone. I'm not good at this.
I think it can be different too, right? Like, so for some people, getting connected with the youth in your youth program is super good to get them connected into the church and serving in that way. But then for other people, it's like doing that after Sunday, inviting people over for a meal or to talk on the phone or whatever that looks like. I really appreciate what you said about not feeling like programs are the way into relationship. For some people, that might be a really good way, but for other people, it might just be connecting with people in the church and seeing how they're doing.
And Hans, to answer your question, what is considered a young adult these days? At Cornerstone, we say like from graduation to 30-ish. And the ish is like, pretty wide. You can cast that net as wide as you want with the ish. Now, if we're going into
Daryl talked about how there was nothing in between young adults and 55 plus.
Yeah.
maybe it should just be like 18 to 55. And no,
Oh, there you go.
a little bit, but
Yeah, and it's, I mean, if we're going into like, emerging adulthood and all of that, some studies are now saying you are an emerging adult till your early 30s. So you don't have to become an adult until then. So that's why we got the itch.
I'm 30-ish. Thanks,
Right.
Don. We'll just leave it at that. Okay.
I think young adults is until you feel like you're done being a young adult, Hans. I think that's, so you're saying 4 kids disqualifies you. If you feel that that disqualifies you, then that's okay.
What were you saying?
I like what Colleen said, how it's up to each of us to be intentional on purpose, right? Like, and I mean, you were saying it, Austin, too, those moments before something where it's just so hard to get out, and it'd be much easier to say like, no, not going to do it. But being intentional about it and making it a priority. Yeah. And the relationship part of it. Like, I like how you said, sometimes programs are great for people getting connected, and sometimes it's something totally different, totally more organic looking, I guess it could, right? So, yeah.
And I think, yeah, I love what Don said, right? This, we compartmentalize, but the early church, it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the big differences, right? We've made church an aspect of our lives as opposed to like, it's part of who we are.
Yeah.
And if we want to get back to that family early church, it's learning to make church just part of our DNA. And that doesn't mean we're at church every day or every hour and that's all we think about, but it's just part of who we are. It's the same when we talk about what does it mean to be a Christian, right? Being a Christian isn't like, well, I'm going to do these things for Jesus in these hours, and it becomes everything it's all of who we are. And everything we go and do, we are still a Christian, as opposed to I am a doctor who is a Christian, right? I'm a Christian who happens to also be a doctor. It's the same idea with the church.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm super passionate about that. Like, I feel, I always say I feel, but that's going to change our attitude towards church as well, right? If we feel like we're part of the church and it's part of our DNA, then we are actively engaged in the service, right? Wilma is not worship leading to please us and pick the songs that we want. And we didn't put Justin on there because he has an amazing voice, right? Those people are really good leaders into us worshiping as a community, which is really weird and hard for me to say coming from like the technical standpoint when I listen to the live stream to make sure it sounds good and to try to get the volumes right. So there's a weird balance there. But especially now, I think it's super dangerous that we fall into this rut of this being similar to Netflix, where we are just sitting there and we're taking in the service, and then we leave, and then we kind of, I know I can be nitpicky about certain things, like, well, that wasn't a smooth transition, that was awkward, but it's, I mean, looking at the early church, everything was awkward, right? Like, it was exciting to be together. And that was what made church, is just being together and learning. So much so that people would fall out of windows and die because they did it for so long, right?
Yeah.
That's why this season of our life is so difficult, right? To actually, I mean, we're talking about church as family, but realistically, it's hard when we're not actually able to be together. Like, even in a small group, connecting is difficult right now, right? Like, let's acknowledge that this is not an easy thing.
No.
Yeah. But it's nice to sort of feel connected on Sunday morning because we are watching something, but it's still not quite the same, right?
Yeah. This is a hard time. Hans, you're absolutely right. He made a comment like that the 20-somethings could learn from the 30-somethings, which leads to discipleship. And that's why we've been harping on small groups, not on young adults, on youth group, on those things I think are important. And there's a place to have community with people your own age, but that's not supposed to be the be all end all. Church is about that intergenerational connection and discipleship. And I'm really passionate about mentorship. And I think it's so important that our young people are getting mentored by old people, but not just one way, right? I think people older can learn from those that are younger, and we have to realize there's beauty in the body of Christ. And the body of Christ was not all one generation. And so when we say you should be in a small group, we're not saying you should be a small group of like-minded people of the same age and the same life experience. My pod group right now, I've loved it. We have the whole gambit of people joining us, and it's been an amazing opportunity to learn with one another and to just grow. And it's people that outside of that pod group may have never connected on a Sunday morning, probably. But that's why things like small groups are so helpful in building community and building family, because we get to learn from one another in a real way.
Can we spend some time on Marie's comment here?
Yeah, I was going to ask that too.
So this is, I agree with what you're saying, Marie, and it's hard. I come from a very healthy family situation. So it's hard for me to think of it as someone who doesn't, but I wonder if it's similar to calling God our Father, when some people don't have a good relationship with their father. And I'm wondering if we don't shy away from saying that church is a family, and we just redeem the word family and redeem what that looks like. But what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think I would have probably landed on the same as the idea of God as Father, and how that can be painful for people. And when at youth group we talk about God as our Father, we make that explanation, right? God is a father, and we understand that people have broken relationships with their parents. My parents aren't together. I have a not great relationship with my dad, but the ability to view God as Father has been redeeming for me. But that took work, and that took understanding of what that meant. And I think in the same way, family can be that. I think Marie's follow-up, right? If on the other hand, we don't have that and the church family doesn't come through, right, that is a big issue. And so we do harp on church being family, but I think that is an important reminder. We need to be really careful that if we're going to say we're a family, that we actually be a family, and that we don't just use the term for the sake of using the term.
Because that'll just add more fuel to the fire of what family means, right? If we don't redeem the word, then it's just going to make the word worse, I suppose.
Yeah.
What do you think, Mary?
I don't know. I think, there's so much relationship in who God is and what the church is. These words are used throughout Scripture, like Father and sons, and we're adopted into his family as children. And, there's the marriage between Christ and the church. Like, all of these are relational terms, and Rick talked about a lot of them this morning. And for sure, in our world that is so broken, we have these broken relationships, broken marriages, broken families, broken, everything. It hurts. It hurts people who have these broken things, and then we're talking about them in this positive light, for sure. So I would say in God's eyes, this is the idea, right? This relationship thing, that we are in this wonderful family. Not true for everyone. I can see why that would be painful for some. Yeah.
And I think we have to be willing to own up to the fact that the term family does mean messiness, right? Like, even when we say the church is a family, family is messy. And part of it is being able to walk through that messiness together, but we have to be willing to do that. And I like what Dawn said, right? As a leader in the church, the term family, you have to be willing to own that, be truly invested as a family member. She used the term, is our church ready to write that check that our butt will cash? Right? Are we willing to actually put the work in? Or are we just using terms for the sake of using them? And I don't think Cornerstone is. I think we truly are attempting to work and grow as a family. But I think it is really important, Marie, that we are careful with these things and that we actually think through it and reflect on it and talk about what that means and then live it out.
Yeah, and being part of a family is like you said, messy, but it also means accountability, right? Like, so Michael, you mentioned that you are like, your personality is okay with being called out on things, whereas my personality has a really, and I'm trying to get better at it, but it has a really hard time being called out on things. But that's part of being a family, right? So growing up, I don't know if I should share this online, but I'm going to. Growing up, my brother consistently called me out for smelling bad. Like when I was hitting puberty, it was like 2 or 3 times a day he'd tell me to go put deodorant on, and I was so mad at him for it. But then eventually, I think other people stopped smelling me because I was putting that deodorant on. So there's this. We want to be a family in the good times, but then when we get called out, we're individuals sometimes. And that's part of child dedication as well, right? Bringing them into the family. And yeah, so I know that's something I need to work on, is just being called out on things that I'm not doing well or things I did wrong, and being okay with that, because that is my family, and I should trust that that is coming from a place of love rather than a place of just tearing down for the fun of it, right?
Well, and I think, family, like that accountability piece is so key, because we're all going to mess this up. And I think that's why I love, Marie, that you come and you call us out on things and you ask hard questions, and like, right, you're challenging us to think through these terms, to think through our experience of privilege, all of those things, and that's needed in the body. We need people to call us out and to challenge us to be better, and that's part of what being a family is being willing to say, hey, that thing you did, it's not cool. Or, hey, you said you were going to help this person, but you didn't really follow through. So what does it look like to make amends? What does it look like to grow, to be better? And I think that's why we weren't meant to do Christianity alone, because we won't ever have that accountability if we're by ourselves.
Yeah. Should we do question 4?
Yeah.
I'm super curious about this one.
Rick leaving this one to last. We love you, Rick. So how often should we do the Lord's Supper? Weekly, monthly, yearly? There are biblical arguments for any of these answers. What are your thoughts? I'll start. I don't know if I have like a specific, like it has to be done, but like I look in scripture and it's like anytime they gathered, they had communion together. And this communion wasn't specifically about, okay, we're going to have this tiny little wafer of bread and this thimble of juice, and that's communion. Communion is, right, we remember Jesus as we have the meal. And the reason they called the early church out was like, you're eating all of the food before everyone else gets there. It wasn't just one piece, right? It was a meal together, and they were abusing it because they were eating it before the other people joined. But so I think we need to get, like, I sit there and I go, let's do it more. I'm like, let's do it when we gather. Was the thing I wish we did almost is that we had communion at potlucks, right? Because there is that level of like, we're having that meal together. Let's remember Jesus in that. And we do it through prayer and we do it through conversation, but the intentionality of it.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. Marie, we are not saying you were calling us out. It was a really good question to ask, because I come from a healthy family. So don't feel like we're saying anything bad about that. I really appreciate the question.
Yes. No, I was trying to communicate how much I appreciated your question, not that I felt like attacked. So I apologize if it came across that way. No, what I was like, I love that. Like, let's have those conversations. Let's make sure we're being accountable. Let's make sure we're actually thinking through these things and not just, that's great. So
not
yes.
using words. Oh, yeah, I agree. And it's interesting to hear from a counselor's perspective as well on that matter, right? Because we can forget that. Going back to question 4. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of reading and paper writing on communion for my classes, and ideally, like my dream utopia world would be a weekly communion celebration, and then once a month doing a potluck where we celebrate communion and like an actual meal that we can partake together, and we can like gather our food, sit down, we pray together, and then we eat till we're full. I know that that's difficult though, because I mean monthly makes more sense for logistics and how easy it is. Not saying that's why we should do things, but traditionally that's how I've always done it. Monthly or bi-monthly or whatever that looks like. I've never done it weekly. And I've read books on how people are very afraid that weekly communion is going to make it less special because we have it often. But then the rebuttal to that was like, so why do we preach every week then? I mean, why is that not being belittled? It's an experience as a community to come before God, so it shouldn't ever really lose its fire because of how often we do it.
Yeah.
But that's my dream. Weekly and then once a month potluck.
Yeah, it's interesting, like the difference between like having a meal as a community and calling that like the Lord's Supper, right? Because it was so communal, or then having, the bread and the juice on a Sunday morning, which is also like so important. I feel like there is almost a distinction there, and maybe there should be, maybe there shouldn't be. I'm not sure. I agree. Weekly could be amazing, if you put your heart into it and you acknowledge who you are before God. Partaking of that together as a body of believers, I think, is amazing. I get it for sure. Logistically, that might be interesting. Might cost more financially too. But how cool if people were actually coming, knowing that we were going to connect before God and the table, and knowing that, yeah.
So Daryl asked if there's biblical arguments for each of these.
Yeah.
Oh, off the top of my head, I can think of weekly and yearly biblical arguments. Can you guys think of monthly?
I mean, I would guess that the monthly would be like using this, like, because I can think of the weekly and the yearly arguments. I would think that the monthly is like taking those same passages but interpreting them differently. Would be how I guess that, like, right? Because I can't think of a specific like monthly do this, but yeah. Somewhere right between the anytime you gather and the like, this is a ritual that's important and that's we need to like make specifically into the experience.
Yeah. So I guess like the weekly would be what you said with when you gather. So we gather weekly. So it would be we break bread when we gather on a Sunday morning. The yearly would be because it came from the Passover meal, right? And so just following that, which I think more conservative Mennonite tradition has really stuck with going yearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I can see what you mean about monthly just being the same passages, but
yeah,
I would really like to try going weekly for a certain period of time, and Rick and I have talked about that, but just to experience what it would be like rather than, just imagining.
I like what Colleen I think Colleen said something about doing it weekly.
The
Yeah, about it becoming like a ritual or something.
yeah,
Let's scroll back on my
there's
chat.
been like there's still like 2 comment threads going, so I'll
Yeah.
find it.
Yeah.
Is it the danger one? The okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true that it could become ritualistic. I think Rick mentioned that even this morning, like how we pray before a meal. Sometimes it's just something we do rather than actually like spending time thanking God for what He's provided. So I can see why there could be a danger in it, but also how beautiful it could be to come together.
Yeah.
Weekly.
Yeah, and like the comment right before by Dawn, just the rethinking hospitality, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we have people in our homes, we break bread together, we take time to remember Jesus' sacrifice, and that brings huge context to our fellowship. And I think that's the importance with whether you do monthly, weekly, yearly, it's the intentionality behind it. Because if you do weekly and it isn't intentional, then it does just become a thing you do. In the same way that some people show up to church every Sunday and it's just because you're supposed to show up to church. There's no intentionality there. So it has to be that framing it around Jesus' sacrifice and having that be a meaningful experience, especially if you're doing it weekly. You have to be really intentional with that, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's 2 things that I wanted to talk about Colleen and Hans's comment, but I also want to talk about Stephanie's comment there, because she's kind of pushing against the weekly thing, which I appreciate, because maybe we shouldn't, instead of just increasing the amount that we do it, we should first start with the intentionality of communion. And because we don't really go around and check each person and checking our hearts before we do it. We kind of just leave that up to the congregation to make sure of, right? And so there might be some strength in trying that, in trying to build that community of openness and freedom to share.
Yeah. Well, and I know there are traditions that is why it's done like yearly, right? The deacons will go and they will check with every person and make sure that they're right between them and the Lord, and then before you have communion, right? And if not, now go talk to your brother and make amends before you come back to the table. Which there's biblical reasons for that for sure too.
Yeah, and like it's interesting because there's Paul talks about making sure that we're right before others and before God. But Don's right. There wasn't unity in the first one, right? Because Judas was there and Jesus knew what was going to happen. And he didn't call him out.
I mean, he actually gives him the communion, like, right? Like the bread and the wine is like, okay, you did this. You're the one that's the bit, like, that's good. So, yeah, no, it's...
So yeah, what about Hans and Colleen, sorry. Like Colleen talked about, can communion be done without pastors? And she said that she believes it is, but she wants to hear kind of what other thoughts are. So Mary, you're not a pastor anymore. What do you think? Do you think you can do communion if you just had some friends over?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think, I mean, again, it was said this morning, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there is the Lord as well, right?
Yeah.
And if we're truly gathering in His name, and like, why can't we break bread together and share in that, right?
I would agree with that. My brother is very big on doing communion in the house when people are there, joining together as Christ's body and breaking bread, and then having conversation about all of that. And so, yeah, I think that oftentimes, like baptism and dedication and communion, we think that it's a pastoral rite, but it just happens that pastors are the ones speaking at the time, so they facilitate that, right? It's not something that is I guess this goes to the priesthood of all believers, right? And just that's, as a believer, we have that.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I think church tradition has really dictated a lot of the time that pastors that do it. Like, that has become what we do. But I don't think that is inherent in what we're called to with communion. We're called to don't do it like it's meant to be in community, and I think for the most part that needs to be the case. Now I think there are exceptions, right, where you're in a country where you can't gather. I think if you want to, like, communion still is a valuable part of your Christian experience, but I think the community is the key to communion, not having a pastor orchestrate it. I like Daryl's comment just about this, the show The Chosen. So observing the Sabbath in homes as displayed in The Chosen brings it back to fellowship and hospitality in the homes in a powerful way. And The Chosen is amazing. If you haven't seen it, it's free. It's a great show about the early church and Jesus. And but I think there is just this beauty in communion in homes. And in like, I think one of the things that the church has always done, right, is bring communion to shut-ins. And right, often that has been a pastor, but that hasn't always been a pastor. And just right, that if we're saying it can't be done that way, then what are we saying to people that can't make it to church because they're shut in? That you can no longer be part of this? I think we'd be doing a real disservice if that was the case, right?
So what about who should partake in communion? So Rick kind of goes through this at the beginning of every communion, and we ask that you partake as a believer. I know other churches you have to be a member, right, to partake in communion. I went to a Catholic church when I was younger, and you needed to be baptized before you could partake in communion. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Sorry,
do you like that we do it just as believers and leave that up to whoever wants to partake? If you believe you're a believer, then you can partake with us.
I think that's like the way I like to see communion done, right? Is like, if you are a believer and you say you follow Jesus and you want to be part of the communion table, join us. I don't think, when I look at the way the early church did it, it wasn't like, oh, you're not part of our church, so you can't take communion with it, right? It just comes back into that community piece and the, like, we are all one family under Christ. And if you say you follow Jesus, you are part of our family, whether or not you're from here, whether or not we know you. And I think that's part of the beauty of taking communion on a Sunday morning, is if you say you're a follower of Jesus, but you're visiting, join in on our celebration.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. It's been interesting raising kids in this and kind of figuring that out with them. And I appreciate the way our church handles it and how they encourage us to talk to them as communion is happening, and just kind of understanding that their faith in Jesus is newer and fresher than mine. But like equal in so many ways, right? And so to partake together as a family with my small children, which is probably something I would not have been allowed to do growing up in the church, I value it. I value knowing that my kids, it's simple. It's a simple faith, but it's faith in Jesus. So it's really cool.
It's kind of a benefit of being online. Like, I like how Rick was like, I promise you're not going to disrupt us here if you just talk about this, right? It's there's strength. Sometimes I feel when we're in person, it's super rushed. Like, well, we don't have time to talk about this right now, so we'll talk about it when we get home. Or there's strength in just pausing. Maybe we need to do that when we get back in person. Like, we're gonna pause. You can talk to your kids about this. You can talk to the friend that you brought or whatever that looks like about who is partaking and why we're partaking, right? Just kind of even reminding ourselves why we're partaking so it doesn't become that ritual that we were talking about.
Yeah. And like, I miss taking communion in person, partially because I love seeing parents talk with their kids, right? Like Rick's like, this isn't a disruption, but like on Sunday morning in person, like there's just like the beautiful like picture when you get to watch parents walking their kids through this. Like one of my favorite communion experiences was William and Lisa's daughter. They were both on stage for something. So Lisa's like, can you do communion with, I want to say it was Iona, and just talk with her beforehand. She's done it before, but like we like to talk to her every time. And so I got to do that with somebody else's kid. And like for me, that's a beauty of the body of like, right. She's a believer. She's ready to do this. She's done it before, but we like to like make sure she remembers why she's doing it. It's not just a thing, but we can't because we're on stage. So can you do it? And just, I don't know, that like, that still sticks out to me as one of my favorite communion memories. Yeah.
Lots of comments here.
Yes. Daryl says believers can take nothing else. Hans talks about baptism being a public display of faith, but not necessarily required for communion.
So sorry, Daryl, I'm going to ask you a question here. Is that our job as the church to monitor that, or is that a personal thing that we just leave up to people? I'm not saying it's right either way. I'm just curious what you would think on that. Sorry, go ahead. You were highlighting other ones. I'll leave that.
No, I was highlighting Daryl's for you, so you're fine. Oh. It's good. While we wait for Daryl to respond, but yeah, Colleen talks about it just being a personal, and it's on each of us to be responsible for God, not others. So that's, I think, answering your question there, Austin, of just right.
Yeah.
We aren't called to say whether somebody's a Christian or not. We don't know people's hearts. God does. We can say, hey, if you're a believer, join us. But it's on them to decide whether that they fit that bill or not, I think.
Yeah. But I would agree with that, Daryl. I like that. It's a personal thing. I mean, it's a good, we need to make people knowledgeable on what's expected, and then maybe having a conversation with them afterwards if we have questions about it. But it's not because like you said, Michael, we can't know, right? I'm not going to go up to someone and be like, you're not actually a Christian, even though you think you are. So, but I busted you, Mary. Now people know you were a pastor.
Yeah.
Mary was a youth pastor.
Yeah.
10 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
In Ontario. So.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was Calgary.
No, Ontario.
What year were you done being a pastor? When did you end?
Yeah, 2010.
Okay, yeah.
That was a total guess, but I nailed it.
Nice work. Yeah.
Good job, Austin.
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't remember. We had talked about this one time. I knew it was longer than 7 because that's how long I've been at Cornerstone. You've been here the whole time. So
yeah.
There you go.
Right after Elias was born, and then we moved. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do love this this baptism idea by Hans to do a dunk tank style, because then there's social distancing in effect.
With my growing, I don't know if anyone would ever get baptized.
Yeah. I used to go to Lakewood Baptist, which met in Lakewood Civic Center, and our joke was always we were going to start using the water slide for our baptisms. Like push them down. We never did it, though.
Or just like hit the end of the diving board and have them bounce off like in the cartoons.
Yeah. Daryl says we should be more accountable if we are members in many things, which I agree with. Like, we need to bring back what membership means, and that it's more than just signing up to be a member so you can show up to AGM and vote on things.
Mhm.
There is a more commitment that's supposed to be involved in that. Don, one of the most freeing moments of my life was leaving the judgment up to God. Amen to that.
Yes.
We aren't called to judge people.
Mhm.
But then, yeah, she also follows up with the context of like, when there's clear sin involved, we are called as Christians to call that out. And so
Mhm.
there is a balance there. All right, I think we'll move on. We'll give you all the take home, because it's already noon. So
Yeah.
we've been on here for a while. We should probably wrap things up at some point and go have lunch and all of those things. Have a meal with your family or yourself.
We can do this,
Uh,
our take home at this meal.
yeah,
There you go.
maybe if you want, contact somebody, have a Zoom call, eat a meal together. Me and my family sometimes does that. It's not the same as being in person, but it still brings in some community. So your take home this week is, at meal times, say thank you, God. Thank you to God and to the others with you.
Mm.
But I think Rick's heart there is the intentionality of it, right? We pray before meals, but don't make it just a mundane, oh, I prayed for a meal because we're supposed to.
Yeah.
And then that's why he says in the underneath, share with one another what you are especially thankful for, and make that an intentional time as opposed to just something you do.
Mhm.
So that's the take home. There's still chat going on. There's conversations, but I think we are gonna wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us, Mary. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary.
And thank you to everyone that joined us in the chat. It was a great conversation. If you want to continue the conversation, feel free to Facebook message us, email us, call the office, set up a Zoom coffee date. Austin's the one that always says it on Sunday morning, but I'll have a Zoom coffee date with you too. That's fine. And maybe even Mary will. I don't know. I can't speak for Mary. She's not on
Sure.
staff. But I'm
I'll
sure
sign up.
Yeah, there you go. Mary will have coffee with you too.
For sure. Anytime.
All right. Thanks, everyone.